Welcome to our podcast, Raising Big. This podcast is an ongoing conversation between myself and my young adult son. We're ready and willing to talk about all the things families might experience in their lives and relationships, both as parents and as young adults, from teens to 20-somethings, the good, the bad, and sometimes even the ugly. In this episode, we're sharing 5 things a young adult might want to hear from their parent and 5 things a parent might want to hear from their grown kid. Sometimes we just don't think about saying the important things. Sometimes we don't know exactly what to say. And sometimes we think it, but we don't have the courage to say it. So in this episode, hopefully it will help you think about and spur conversation between parent and child. What would you each like to hear from the other side of this relationship? Let's dive in. I'm Marcy and I'm the mom.
I'm Cayd and I'm her kid. I'm going to start with 5 things that, as a kid, I believe in general, most kids want to hear from their parents. Of course, this is only 5 things. It's not all encompassing. There's so many other things that kids would like to hear from their parents, and we'll kind of dive later into what parents would like to hear from their kids. But the first thing that comes to mind, just starting it off simple, as a kid from your parent, you want to hear that they love you. I think that a lot of times in relationships, whether it's parents and kids or romantic relationships or with your siblings or friends or whatever, it's easy to get caught up in the fact of, oh, they're my kid, they know I love them, or oh, they're my parent, they know I love them. I don't, whether you think, oh, I don't need to say it, or you say it, you think you say it too much or whatever. I think that that is something that is really simple that can really just, you never know what someone is going through, whether it's a kid, a parent, a friend, whatever. So maybe they're having a rough day at school or at work or whatever, and they don't tell that to you, but just hearing I love you makes a big difference. I know we've had conversations about in our house how anytime we're just going out the door, we'll say, okay, I'm headed off to the store or to the gym or whatever, bye, I love you. Or anytime we hang up the phone, it's always I love you. Or sometimes even if I'm just going downstairs to put my clothes in the washer, it's okay, I'm going downstairs, I love you. So I think that that's just something that as a kid has really helped me, growing up in a house where I love you was said very commonly and all the time and just randomly. It's always made me feel like that support and that love was always there.
Yeah, and I don't think just because it's been said more often, it's any less genuine. That's something that I remember my youngest sister, your Aunt Megan. I remember when she was a little kid, like she was the one who insisted every time you walked out the front door that you said, I love you. Like that was her thing. And so we just kind of have carried it on, and we say it in text messages, we say it in our group text. It's really, really common, but I don't necessarily feel like just because it's said all the time means it means any less. It's almost a reassuring thing for me. And even and especially when times are a little hard, difficult, stressful, like to have that be the common thread that goes through that always. Like no matter how mad I am about something, no matter how upset, disappointed you might be, whatever, there's always an I love you. And it's just reassuring to know we're going to make it through whatever's going on right now because I love you.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you think number 2 is, Cayd?
Number 2, I would say, I think that something a lot of kids would want to hear from their parents is, especially as they get older, into the 20 somethings kind of age range that we're talking about. Sometimes it's good as a kid to understand where your parent was coming from when it comes to certain situations as a kid. So this one's obviously a little bit deeper than just I love you. But, maybe if you and one of your parents or both your parents went through some tough times when you were a kid, being able to really hear and understand what was going through, their mindset as a parent. I know we've had conversations about some things that have happened throughout my childhood, and it's been good to understand your perspective and kind of, you saying, oh, well, I did this because it's what I had to do, or it was my only choice. And I think that that just kind of helps put things into perspective. Especially like I said, as a kid, it's easy to think, when you're 10 years old, you don't have that full wealth of knowledge to be able to really understand where your parents coming from or what their perspective is. But as you get older, I feel like it's important to share with your kid, something that they would want to hear is kind of an explanation to kind of put a title on number 2, whether that's good things you did or bad things you did or mistakes you made or things you thought you did well. I think that as a kid, that is something that's valuable to hear.
Yeah, because sometimes there's assumptions that can be made, right? Like my parent did things this way because X, Y, or Z, and you might be totally off the mark. And it might be something where a kid is blaming their parent for doing something in a way that they wouldn't have chose to do it, but without understanding the context, sometimes it's hard to give your parent that grace to understand why things unfolded the way they did. So I think even if something comes up, let's say something happens on a Friday night with your kid and you two of you get into something about it, like it doesn't have to be years later that you're explaining things. You can just say, hey, on Friday night when this exploded or this conversation didn't go the way I anticipated, here's where I was coming from, and take advantage of that moment. Don't let the hurt kind of simmer over time and then revisit it later. Like call a spade, right? And step into the moment and be courageous and give that explanation. And even if the people don't agree, right? Like you said before on the podcast, you're coming and looking for an answer, not necessarily an agreement. And so that understanding is uber important, I think, to building that mutual respect. So
for sure.
I like that
and
one.
I think that
Number
it's
two, an explanation.
Yes, for sure. And I think that it's important to, like you said, kind of address things in the moment as much as you can. Obviously, there's some things that with little kids, they can't quite understand. So that might be something you need to talk about later on. But I think in the it's just in the long run is so much better to address things in the moment because, let's say something happened 2 years ago. For the past 2 years, I might have had this preconceived notion in my head of, oh, you made this decision because X. And that might not have been the truth all the whole time along. So I think that that's something that's really important, just to address it in the moment and understand that, as much as they are your kid, once they get to that late teenage, that 20 something, 30, 40, 50, age, they're adults. They're old enough to understand what's going on and to have the hard conversations that you need. They're not your little baby anymore.
Right? Even though they feel like they're still your baby.
Exactly.
And there's three sides to every story, right? And sometimes we misremember things. So there's your side, my side, and the truth, right? And so if we've each misremembered things or remembered things in a very unique perspective, just being able to share that sometimes can clear the fog.
For sure. And then I think a third thing that kids would like to hear from their parents, especially when kids, maybe have something in their life different than their parents, maybe your parents, were doctors or something like that, and you want to be an artist or, something like that. I think something that a lot of kids want to hear from their parents is that even though your life is different than mine, I still support you and I still am here for you and I still love you. I am a huge believer in there's not really a right or wrong path in life. Obviously, if you're murdering people and stuff like that, that's not a good path. But, in general, whether it's you decide to go to college or stay at home or, take this job over that job, I don't really think that there's necessarily a wrong way to do life. I think that life is just all about every decision you make takes you down a different path, and there's not a right or wrong or a bad path. It just is a different path depending on what decisions you make. So I think that that is something that I've seen with a lot of my friends and just people I know, is that sometimes their parents don't support them in what they want to do. Their parents might have had a dream of, oh, my kid's going to turn out like this, or my kid's going to end up doing this with their life, or my kid's going to live here, or my kid is going to, have kids, or my kid's going to get married. And, maybe that's not the path that your kid chooses. So I think that it's important to, as a parent, tell your kid, even though you maybe either didn't, do what I had envisioned you to do, or your life path isn't the same as mine, that I still support you and I'm still here for you and I still love you. Because speaking from experience as a kid, it can feel hard when you feel like your parents don't support you. We've kind of talked about this in the past, but your parent is supposed to be that one close relationship in your life. And if you don't feel like they're there to support you and encourage you, that can really take an effect on you for sure.
Yeah. And as a parent, it's important to remember that it is your child's life. Like, I think, the generation before mine, their choices were very narrow. My generation, our choices were a little wider, but there was still a lot of expectation by society that you were going to do things in a certain order and you were going to do things the way they were expected, right? You were expected to toe the line. You were expected to be responsible, and anybody who didn't follow that prescribed path was a lot of times looked down on or called the wild child or the black sheep and then now it's like you look at the young millennials, the Gen Zs, and then these little alphas coming up that are a whole nother topic of conversation. Like, you guys don't believe there's a path. Like, every single choice you make determines your path. And so as a parent, you have to wrap your head around that and realize it is their life. They're making their choices. They have to bear the consequences of their choices if they make bad choices, but then they also get to claim the rewards if they take the risk and things work out well. So, but that support, like, even if your child takes the risk and falls, right? even if that happens, knowing that they have your support is what makes them, number one, brave enough to step out and try some new things
Mm-hmm.
and follow their dreams, knowing that they've got that safety net there. Not that you're going to bail them out financially, not that you're going to bail them out of
Uh-huh.
jail, not that you can fix things for them, but that you'll be like, oh, okay, what did we learn? How are we going to go forward from this?
Mm-hmm.
To give you a hug, back to the I love yous, right? But if you never risk, you never get that chance to experience what you
Yeah,
truly dream. And so I think parents, need to realize that just expressing their support to their kids unceasingly, right? Like, this is
mm,
your life. You can make your choice. I may not agree with your choice. That's okay, but I still support you in following your dream.
for sure. And like you said, I think that, like you said, people from your generation, even older than you, it was like you graduated college and then or you graduated high school, went to college, and then you got married, and then you had kids, and you worked your 9 to 5, and it was kind of like everything was played out for you, and you did specific jobs. There wasn't, being a social media influencer back then, or things like that. It was very kind of cut and dry of what people did. And so I think that it just, like you said, there might have been, those one or two people from your hometown that didn't go to college or decided not to, go get a secretary job or whatever
Mm-hmm.
after school. And that was always kind of like, oh, I can't believe she's doing that, or he's doing that, or I can't believe,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like you said, I do think, again, just speaking from experience, a lot of people from my generation have realized there isn't a path. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
get married by a certain age, or you don't have to go to college either by a certain time or at all. You don't have to have kids. You don't have to do this and do that. And I honestly think that that's a really special place to be in.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of a lot of the kids of my generation that we've been able to kind of break that and understand, what's right for us. I do think there is kind of, on the flip side of that, there is a lot of comparison, I think, especially with
Mm-hmm.
social media and stuff, of a lot of like, oh, other 16-year-olds are doing this, or other 20-year-olds are doing this, or other 30-year-olds are doing this. But I think overall, a lot of us just have a strong sense of self and understanding that we're all on our own path. And that just because this person at 22 just got into med school, and this person at
Mm-hmm.
22 maybe is, working a different job, that's not a bad thing. And it's just, everybody's got a different path.
Yeah. But their parents are going to support them no matter what.
Exactly.
That's
That's
number
what you
3.
need to hear. Exactly. The fourth thing I would say that a kid would like to hear from their parents, again, kind of just something simple, is that, just an I'm proud of you and some encouragement. I think that goes a long way at all stages of life, whether it's high school, that can be super, super challenging time, just socially and educationally and all of that, as well as, once you get out into the real world and you start working your first real job. And again, it kind of goes into that comparison. It's easy to beat yourself up and look at everyone else and think you're not maybe doing as well. So I think as a parent, it's really important to let your kid know that you're proud of them. It kind of goes back to the I love you thing. Sometimes I think parents or friends or family kind of just assume that that I'm proud of
Mm-hmm.
you. And, maybe you say it every so often, so you just don't think it's that important. But I'm really big on, kind of like you talked about earlier, it's just kind of that reassurance and not having to, ask, are you proud of me, or did you like
Mm-hmm.
that? And I even know, just speaking from experience, when like we have a family group chat and we'll all kind of share things that happen in our life, whether it's we got a new job or we graduated or whatever it may be. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be I'm proud of you, period. Like, it doesn't need to be that exact phrase, but just saying, oh, I'm so glad all that hard work paid off, or I'm so glad you were able to accomplish that, and I'm proud of you for doing so, or I'm proud of you for putting in the work that you needed to, get this certification, or whatever it is. I think that is just something that's really encouraging and helps build that relationship between a parent and a child.
Yeah, I love that you said that it's not just I'm proud of you, period, because what was going through my mind when you were talking about I'm proud of you is that I wanted to challenge parents to up level that and to say
Mm,
I'm proud of you because, and not just because of accomplishment, but I saw how kind you were to your younger brother or sister. I'm
mm-hmm,
proud of you for that. For being proud of you for who you are, not necessarily what you've done. So I
mm-hmm,
think, it's very easy, and I spent some time in the education field to just say, oh, good job. I'm proud of you. Like, and you can just blanket statement that. It's
uh-huh.
very unlike the I love you. Like, I feel like I'm proud of you needs a for what? Exactly.
Yes,
Because
for
to
sure.
me, it shows that you are truly tuned in to your person that you're talking to, right? and that you've clued in enough to recognize the hard work or the dedication that it took, or, you know, if they were really fighting against something hard, that they had the fortitude to stick it out, you know, whatever those specifics are. Like, I would challenge parents to up level the blanket I'm proud of you period. Like, make it I'm proud of you for, and not always about accomplishment, but also about who they are.
And I think it's really important too to recognize the work that's been done to, you know, if it is an accomplishment to get there. Let's say, you know, you graduated college. Instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for graduating college," you know, like you kind of said, up level that and take it to, "I'm proud of you for all those nights that you spent up late studying to make sure you passed your finals," or, you know, those little things that happened along the way. You know, everybody is congratulating them for graduating college, or everybody is saying something that they got a new job or had a baby or, you know, bought a house or whatever. But they might, you know, not be congratulating them on, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for all the nights that you decided not to go out to eat and cook at home so that way you could, you know, save for a down payment on your house." Or I even know, just like speaking from experience, when I ran my first marathon last fall, something that just I kind of recognized and always acknowledged was that you were like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for, you know, all the times that, you know, or so proud of you that you stayed on track with your meal planning and what you were eating," or "I'm so proud of you for, you know, never miss, or, you know, not missing runs," or things like that during my training. And I think that that, like I said, is almost a little more important and just shows that you're really tuned in and really we're along for the journey. And it's not just about, "Oh, I'm so proud of you for completing this race," but "I'm so proud of you for the work you've done over the past 6 months."
And being a parent is a privilege, right? Not everybody gets that level of vision into their young adult's life, right? Like, in our family, at least, like, we share the details of what's going on and we know the work behind the scenes. And so it does mean more when it's not the hollow, you know, "Oh, I'm proud of you because you completed a marathon." But what was so hard of that? Yes, it's hard to run 21.6
Yes.
miles, but that wasn't nearly as hard as the dedication it took to get you to that point so that you could
Exactly.
finish. For sure. Good one. Number
For
5.
sure. So that's number 4. Number 5, this I kind of just thought about to kind of bring it full circle back to the "I love you." I think one thing that kids really want to hear is that as a parent, not only do you love them, but just to hear "I like you." And not
Ooh.
even necessarily, you know, the phrase "I like you," but "I like that you were, you know, I like the way that you treated this person," or "I like the way that you behaved in this way," or "I like the growth that you've made along the way." Um, Again, it kind of goes back as a parent and a child relationship. It's almost kind of a given that you love them, even though, yes, it is good to hear it. It's good with all of that. That's, you know, easy to know that your parent loves you for the most part. Obviously, yes, there's certain situations where that might not be the case, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But I think it's just important to let them know, like, the noteworthy qualities that you see in them. And again, this is at all phases of life. You know, "I really like the way that you treat people," or "I really like the way that you've worked so hard towards this goal and you've been so dedicated towards it." Different things like that. Like I said, I think it's very common to hear "I love you." It's very common for that. But to hear what you like about your kid and what you admire about them, I think not only one does that make the kid feel good, but it also just naturally subconsciously reinforces whatever that quality is. You know, if I'm, let's say, like, let's bring it back to when we're kids. If I'm being nice to my younger sibling instead of, you know, being mean to them and pulling their hair and all sorts of things, you know, hearing saying, "Oh, I like the way that you know, treat your little brother, little sister," that subconsciously is going to encourage that behavior. So I think that that is something that's really important to hear as a child from your parent.
Well, and everybody wants to be seen, right? And wants to feel like
Hmm.
they're known. And so, if, you know, if I'm saying to you, "Wow," you know, and even if you're not using the word like exactly, like, "I really admire the way you tend to and grow your plants." And not just your
Hmm.
plants, but the plants all over the house, to the point where I'm freaking out once you move out and you leave me with a few, I'm going to kill them all. So because you're not here to do that. But that's something I really admire and like about you, that you found something you're passionate about and that you then are also sharing it with the family. And so it can be
Hmm.
something you admire your child for. It can be something you like. It can be something you appreciate about them. Like, I always appreciate for me to say to you, "I always appreciate how you notice when the dishwasher needs to be emptied, or the coffee maker water pitcher needs to be filled." Those kinds of things. It makes you feel seen. It makes you feel known. And the
Mm-hmm.
telling of them, like it can spur conversation, and then everybody feels heard and included. And so I really do like that. It's not only I love you because, you hear people say, well, I have to love them because they're family, right?
Uh-huh.
Maybe true to a point. Doesn't mean you have to tolerate them if they're
Yeah.
a toxic family member, right? But sometimes when relationships are hard, like I have heard parents say while they are in tears and they're afraid to even say it, I don't like my kid very much right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I will always challenge them, and I will say, it's not that you don't like your kid, it's that there's something that your child is doing that you
Yeah.
don't like. It's a behavior, and everybody has a redeeming quality, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if at any moment you can't find one thing you like about a human, you're not looking deep enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think even when there's a struggle with your kid, you can always find something you like about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the time when you need to say it the most.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like you said, if there is, those points of trouble with, as with any relationship, a parent and a child is going to have ups and downs, but every relationship is. And I think, like you said, it's not necessarily that you don't like your kid in that moment. It's just that you don't like the thing that they're doing or their action or the
Mm-hmm.
choice that they made. And I think, again, that that's important to really illustrate that to your kid is that, I love you and I like you and everything, but I don't like that choice that you made. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that differentiating that helps a lot because it
Mm-hmm.
shows that it's not that you just don't like me as a person and I'm just a horrible person and I just am so miserable and all this stuff. It's just that you don't like that choice that I made, and whether or not that's going to change my opinion on the choice doesn't, that may or may not be a thing, but at least I know that it was just the choice that I made that you didn't like or the thing that I did that you didn't like. So I think that that's really important to separate the maybe one or two things that you don't like compared to your whole child.
For sure. Yeah, that's a really good point.
For sure.
So
But yeah,
that's
so that's five things that I think most kids would like to hear from their parents. Like I said, the list is not all encompassing. There's a lot that kids would like to hear from their parents. And some of those things maybe you already do. Some of those things maybe you sparked an interest and thought, oh, maybe I could do a little better at that, or I could word this a little bit differently.
mm-hmm.
But that is just from a child's perspective, what I think most kids would like to hear from their parents. Now, Mom, five things that you
Mm-hmm.
think most parents would like to hear from their kids.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those, Cayd. I hope parents will make it a point to pick one of those that we talked about or to come up with one of their own that's as meaningful or more meaningful, and then go ahead and share it right now. Like, don't wait. Don't put it on your to-do list. Don't say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Don't wait for the time to be right. Just do it right now. Text your kid if they're not in the vicinity, or when you're done listening, go and touch base with your kid and tell them one of those things right now. This is just a jumping off point. Set an alarm in your phone to remind you, maybe once a week, once a day, whatever you would like to challenge yourself
Mm-hmm.
to say something to your kid that engages them in that way. So on the flip side,
And
oh
real
yeah,
quick, one thing to add on to that, that kind of what you just said kind of just sparked that thought. Something that I've been working on that kind of applies to this is focus when you have those thoughts of, oh, I appreciate my child for unloading the dishwasher. I appreciate my child for doing this or doing that. Just say it the second you think
mm-hmm.
about it, or even if you're sitting at work and you're thinking about your kid, whether they live across the country or they're waiting back at home for you when you get home from work, text them or call them. Just something that I've been really trying to implement in my life is just taking action on those. It's easy to say, oh, I'm thinking about my friend that I haven't seen in a while, I hope they're doing okay, and then you kind of just move on with your day.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been trying to do things, when I have those thoughts, texting them, or if I'm downstairs and I see that maybe you moved something of mine out of the way and I forgot to put it up, telling you, oh, thank you for moving that out of the way. Um, just to, when you have those thoughts of appreciation or anything like that, I just would encourage you to act on them. So if you're listening and you hear, my kid really would like to hear that I'm proud of them, just stop what you're doing, pause the episode right now. We'll be here when you get back, and text them, call them, go downstairs and say it to them, whatever works for you in your situation. I just wanted to encourage that since you kind of brought it up.
I appreciate that. And there's the book called, I think it's called the book, I don't know, the bucket list, maybe. I'll have to look it up. I'll put it in the show notes when I find it. But where it talks about like how many positive interactions there have to be to replace one negative interaction. And so I think it was like a 5-to-1 ratio. Like there have to be 5 good interactions to counteract one negative interaction to keep a relationship healthy. So I read the book a long time ago. That's why I can't remember it, but it's a good thought, right? And so why not take advantage of all of those opportunities to say the good things? Because Lord knows the minute the kid does something to make you mad, you have no problem saying that in the moment. So let's make sure that you're also saying the good things in the moment.
Sure.
More often, 5 times more often than the bad. So switching gears here. So 5 things parents might like to hear from their kids. The first thing that popped into my head was, I appreciate you. I think sometimes when you're a child, whether that's a little kid or a big kid, you may not be aware of how much thought, time, attention, resources go into raising a child. And that's not only financial, but it's, energy and thought and worry and sleep. And there's a lot of things that go into raising a kid, and not only getting them to the age of 18, but beyond that, there's still parenting that goes on. So just I appreciate you, because fact is, like, without parents, none of y'all would be here. So even if there are times that your parent has not done a good job, or if your parent has not done a good job at all, right? Sometimes that relationship is non-existent, and that might look that way. But I bet you there's another adult, an older sibling, somebody in your life that did some things to nurture you and to raise you. So just saying, I appreciate you.
Sure.
And it can be, again, something specific. I appreciate you because, or I appreciated when you did X, but simply an I appreciate you, like, goes a long way. And again, then the parent feels seen, because not only is that important to the kid, but it's important for the parent to feel like their kid appreciates the contribution that the parent has made to getting their child to that point. Yes, the kid has done a lot of the hard work, but a lot of that wouldn't have been possible without the support and assistance of the parents in most cases. I know there are some exceptions to this, but that would be my number one, is I appreciate you. Thoughts on that, Cayd?
Like you said, I think that it's important to know that this doesn't necessarily need to be a biological child and a biological parent. This could be, if you were raised by your aunt or your uncle or your grandparents, or a friend, or whoever, maybe it's an older sibling. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional child-parent relationship. So I just wanted to iterate that. But then also, like you said, with the appreciation, as I've gotten older, I think sometimes as a kid, it's easy to think that, oh, this is kind of just what a parent's supposed to do. A parent is supposed to take me to, my soccer practice, and a parent is supposed to, do this and do that, and run me to the store the night before my project is due because I forgot to get the poster board for it.
That's never happened.
Different things like that. I think that it's important, just when your parent is dropping you off at, soccer practice or the high school football game or whatever, just to say thank you. Or maybe they stayed up late to pick you up from the homecoming dance or whatever. Just to say that appreciation, I think, goes a long way, because looking back at it now, now that I'm older and I see, okay, as a parent, you're getting up early, you're getting your kids ready for school, sending them off to school, then getting yourself ready for work. And then you're going to work 8 hours a day. And then you're coming home and cooking meals for the family, and then running them to practice, and then picking them up later, and then coming back, and then helping with homework, and then getting everyone ready for bed. And then you finally have 2 minutes to yourself before it's time for you to go to bed. I think that appreciation goes a long way, to recognize, hey, mom, hey, dad, I know you took time out of your day to take me to my practice or pick me up from my friend's house or whatever. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that, and again, even as you get older too, it shifts. Let's say maybe you moved out of state from where your parents live, and they came out to visit you just to, check in on you and visit you and see you. They took time out of their day, whether that's time off of work, or, they had to get someone to watch either your younger siblings or pets or things like that, took time to travel. All of that, I think, they're putting in work to either see you or take care of you or provide for you. And I think that thank you and that appreciation can go a long way.
It does go a long way, for sure. It's very reassuring as a parent to know that your kid recognizes your efforts. It's
for
just
sure.
Important. That was a long list of things that you spouted there. Is that why you tell me I'm never getting any grandchildren from you?
Yeah, because the last thing I need is a child right now.
Right. but it is worth it. It is worth every second. I will tell you that 3 times over. It's been worth all the hours and all of that. But my number two thing that I think that parents would like to hear from their kids is, I hear you. I think sometimes parents feel like they're talking to a void. Just by nature, kids in their late teens, early 20s are very self-centered is not the right word, but they are very egocentric in their world, right? Like they are very much on a mission to get their life to where their life is going to go, and very much about their next step and how they're going to get there. And sometimes I think it's hard for them, just because of where they are developmentally, to keep track of everything that's going on around them, let alone what everybody is saying, right? So when there's something that comes up, or a parent sees you going astray, or they're needing your help with something, if you're living away, this might look a little bit different, but sometimes there's like some pretty tense conversations that can happen over a FaceTime or a phone call when something's not going right. And even if you don't agree with what your parent is saying, to make them feel like they're not talking to a void and like you're completely disregarding everything that they have just said to you, you might not think they're right. You might not think what they're saying is relevant. You might not think they have a clue, right? Like that is possible. But to say, I hear you, and to really mean that, like to digest what the parent has said to you and say, I hear you, but I'm choosing to do something else, right? It just, that validating, I hear you, really keeps those lines of communication open and helps parents to feel like they're not being disregarded. Because as much of a struggle as it is for parents to let go of their kid and let them make their own choices, it is also super hard as a parent to watch your child take a step that you feel is going to land them in a heap of trouble, right?
For sure.
And so you want to go back after they land in a heap of trouble and be like, I told you so. And, that's not healthy. That's not going to get you guys anywhere. You want your child to have taken that risk and tried to follow their dreams and do what they feel is right. Learning to trust their gut is important. But if the child at least has listened to what you said and says, I hear you, I still am making a different choice, or I'm going to consider what you said, or it just alters the game a little bit. And you're much less likely, when you try something and it doesn't work out, it's not failure, right? It's a learning opportunity, but much less likely to get that parent who's like, oh, I told them not to do that and they didn't listen to me. But if you told me you hear me, right? That's reassuring to me.
For sure.
That at least I told you and you heard me.
And I think that that's something too, that, looking at the future of a relationship, that's something that's really important, just because, whatever we're having a conversation about now, just because I'm choosing not to take your advice in this moment doesn't mean that next time you might have a piece of advice that, I'm going to value and I'm going to listen and I might do what you say. But again, if you don't feel heard and you don't feel seen, that next time you might not give your opinion because you'll be, oh, last time, he didn't listen to me. And so there's no point in me giving my opinion now. So I think, like you said, even if you are choosing to do something different, even if you don't agree with what they said, even if you think it's stupid or they're not listening or whatever, I think it's important to just say, like, okay, mom, okay, dad, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I see why you want me to do this way, but I really think I should do it this way. So that's what I'm going to do. I think that, like you said, expressing that understanding and that even though I'm doing something different, I do still hear you, just keeps that line of communication open, keeps that relationship in a positive track. And like I said, just allows that communication for the future. Just because the advice you gave me on situation A I didn't like doesn't mean that the advice you give me on situation B I'm not going to like. And I never would get that advice if I didn't tell you I was appreciative for it. And I think one thing else that's really important with that too is, in any situation, whether it's the child asking for advice or the parent asking for advice or a friend or whatever, to really ask whether the person even wants advice or if they just want to listen. That's something that I'm really big on, is asking, do you want a solution to the problem or do you just want someone to hear you? Because I think that can make a difference too. I might be coming to you as your child with a situation and I don't really want, to hear what you would do, or I don't want your help. I just want to vent to someone and to get it out and to let someone know how I'm feeling. So I think that is something too that can kind of help avoid any discourse, if there is any, on a parent sharing their opinion.
I was going to say that exact thing, because, just freely unloading your opinions on your kids, no matter how old they get, right? Like that may not go well, especially if you have a tense relationship or a child that's resistant, even if that child
Hmm.
is 40. Like that child can be resistant to advice, especially if it comes from you, if there's been some contention, right, growing up around that topic. So I was going
Hmm.
to say that exact same thing is, unless you have a free flowing back and forth of advice. I mean, you give me advice on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I give you advice. We don't have the type of relationship where we have to ask each other. We're pretty in tune
Uh-huh.
with, okay, do you just want to lay your head on my shoulder and cry about it?
Yeah,
Or or do you want me to try to fix this for you? I've asked you before, do you want life coach mom or do you want mom? Like
yeah.
who do you want to show up? And so then showing up for you in that way.
Hmm.
But I think it is important to recognize that it may be true that what I have to offer as advice and bring to the situation, because times have changed, is no longer relevant.
Uh-huh.
And it's important for me to know I may have an opinion on your life. It doesn't mean I have a right to share it with you if it's
Hmm.
causing you pain or it's not received well, or like sometimes your opinions need to be kept to yourself. And if your child
Yeah.
says no, I don't want your opinion on it, you need to respect that boundary and
Hmm.
go find someone else to process that with. But it doesn't need to be your kid. And if
For
your
sure.
feelings are hurt because of that, on and on, don't take that out on your kid. Like they get to live their life. So
Uh-huh.
I hear you can be very reassuring to a parent, and it just makes you feel seen again
For
and
sure.
heard, like your kid knows what's going on. Number three is really for kiddos as they kind of get into that college age, right? Like some may still be living at home, some may have left home and launched their own lives. But I think it's really important to recognize that when you leave the nest, your parents don't just stop living and wait for you to come home the next time. Like it's important for me as a parent, and I know other people have expressed the same thing to me. Like it's important for your kid to say, you know what, mom, it's your turn. Go live your
Hmm.
life. Do what you want to do. It's your turn. And you did your job with me. Yes, I still want you there, right? When I pick up the phone
Hmm.
and call you, I still want you to answer. But if you want to move to Florida, move to Florida. If you want to make a career change, make a career change. If you want to sell the family home and downsize, do that. This is your life. Like chase your dreams. You don't have that much time left, but to get that reassurance from your kid that, hey, I'm
Hmm.
launched. You did a great job. I think I'm fabulous, right? Because most kids think they
Uh-huh.
are, and usually they are. And but go live your life. I think that for me would be number three. Like it's your turn. It's your
I like
turn.
that.
Go live your life.
I like that. And like you said, I think obviously I haven't experienced this, but I feel like that's got to be a rough transition as a parent because you
Mm-hmm.
spend, the first 20, 30, 40 years of your life really only worried about yourself. And then you have this, depending on how many kids you have in their age ranges, you have another 20, 30 years where your life pretty much is about your kids. And it's not, you kind of come
Mm-hmm.
second to that. Obviously, yes, you still take care of yourself, but a 2-year-old can't feed themselves. So, you've got to focus on them. You've got to get them what they need to survive and prosper. So then to go back after another 20, 30 years and just life be about yourself. And like you said, oh, I don't have kids to take care of anymore. I don't have anyone to take to practice. I don't have anyone to cook for. Maybe if you were living in a certain area because it had good school systems or whatever, things like that, that's
Mm-hmm.
not an issue anymore. So, like you said, if you do want to move to California or Florida or San Diego or wherever, you can. And I think as a kid, it's important to encourage that. And just speaking from a child's perspective, that can be a hard transition um, to watch your parents kind of
Mm-hmm.
come back into their own as an adult because for my whole life all you've kind of been concerned about is me, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's weird now that you're making decisions and I might not be a factor in that. Obviously, yes,
Mm-hmm.
as a parent you're always thinking about your kids and that sort of thing, but it's not as big of a factor anymore. Where you move doesn't really matter to me. That doesn't You don't have to consider me in that. Where what job you get, that doesn't consider me because you don't need to worry about, oh, am I going to be able to go to Cade's shows or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is something too that as a kid can be a hard transition, is allowing your parent that freedom to kind of come in. This sounds weird to say because they are your parent, but to kind of come into their own and to have that
Mm-hmm.
new kind of rebirth and that new life. And I think it's important as a kid to support them through that, like you said, and just let them know that it's okay and it's your turn, and that it's
Mhm.
okay to not prioritize me in every decision that you make.
Yeah. And it might look different. Coming home at holiday time might look like coming to the beach rather than coming home to Kansas. Like, and this is
Uh-huh.
probably years down the road for us, but like I've made no bones about the fact that I want to be able to walk on the beach once I'm retired.
Uh-huh.
And, that I will make that happen. But knowing that I have the support of you guys in that, and whatever Tim and I decide, you guys will be supportive of that. I think it really means a lot to us that
Hmm.
you guys are free to go live your own lives and make your own choices. But now, ironically, we are too.
Yeah.
And so I think for kids to be aware of that, it's important, and to say those words, it's your turn.
Hmm.
So
For sure.
number 4, I think, and this again is for the kids on the older end of kind of our target audience spectrum. And this increases as kids get older and their parents get older. But the simple phrase, how can I help? So if that looks like your parent is sick and maybe they need a prescription picked up, or they need you to go to the grocery store, or they need you to run them to a doctor's appointment, this doesn't necessarily mean that 100% of what your parent needs falls on you. And it's your job
Hmm.
to maintain a house that they probably should have moved out of years ago because they can no longer do it themselves. Like there's all kinds of things. If there's help out there to get seniors to appointments, but they would rather you do it, but it means you're having to take your vacation time to do so. Like
Hmm.
there's healthy boundaries in there. But if your parents are expressing that they're overwhelmed by something, and this can even be when kids are in high school, and I know you guys used to surprise me even when you were younger than that sometimes. Work would be really heavy, things would be kind of crazy, and all of a sudden I'd come home on a Friday night and the house would be completely picked up. You guys had done your best to clean, and there'd be pancakes for dinner and a frosty beer in the freezer. Lovely combination.
Uh-huh.
But it meant so much to me because you guys had picked up on that, right? So I
Hmm.
didn't say, by the time I get home, this house better be clean and I better have dinner made, right? Like that wasn't something
Yeah.
I asked for. But the how can I help, if a parent is expressing that they're overwhelmed by something, or like there's things that we can't safely do. I have epilepsy. I cannot safely get on a ladder and clear out the leaves out of my gutters. Like that's not a smart choice for me to make
Hmm.
right now. You still live at home, right? Kinsey and Kie live close. And so there have been times where I've been like, hey, I need somebody to clean out
Hmm.
the gutters, or I could really use some help with yard work. That seems to be a common thing around here. And, our older bodies just don't quite take things on as well as they did when we were younger.
Hmm.
And so how can I help? Right? How can I help is great. Or I'm going to be gone this many weeks out of the month. This summer is crazy in our household. One or the other of us is traveling all the time this summer. And so knowing like, hey, I'm going to be gone parts of the next 2 weeks. Like, what can I do to kind of preload, front load, help, right? How
Hmm.
can I help to make sure that things aren't crazy while I'm gone? Things like that I think are really helpful. And parents don't like to have to ask their kids for help, especially once they're grown. Like it's one thing when they're in the house and it seems like a chore, right? Like
Hmm.
parents are great at giving chore lists to kids
Hmm.
that live at home. Kids are not always great about doing said chores, but parents are great at giving those lists. But it is hard once your kid has launched and kind of gone off on their own, or they're busy going to school and working full time or things like that. Sometimes it's really
Hmm.
difficult for parents to ask for help. So if you're seeing the need, just the simple words, what can I do to help,
Uh-huh. And I think with
would be
that
really
too,
powerful.
it's important to, as a kid, kind of be in tune with that, especially as your parents get older and, like you said, maybe aren't physically able to do certain things. And maybe they need help with it, but it is just taken completely differently. I love that you worded it as a question of how can I help? Because, like you said, I know it's maybe not the smartest idea for you to get up on a ladder or things like that. Or there's even been times where, things have maybe fallen behind the couch. And instead of having you get down on your hands and knees to crawl behind it and get it, I'll just ask, here, mom, can I grab it for you? Or whatever the situation is. I think coming at it from a standpoint of how can I help makes a big difference compared to, oh, you can't be doing that or you shouldn't be doing
Mm-hmm.
that. Because that, you know, again, I can't speak from experience, but I'm sure that it is already kind of mentally challenging enough and frustrating to say, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do the things I used to do. So then to have someone come up and be like, oh, mom, you shouldn't be doing this, that, or the other,
Right.
um, is one thing. And I think that it's also important to, if your parent doesn't want the help, to one, and it depends on the situation, but one, accept that and understand that, know that that's kind of something they need to come to terms with on their own. But two, help doesn't always look like doing it for them.
Right.
Maybe if, kind of going back to cleaning the gutters thing, if your parent shouldn't be on a ladder cleaning out their gutters, maybe just ask to come over and do it with them and kind of, work your way into, getting them off the ladder and doing it yourself. But I think that that is kind of something different. Or, like I said, just it can turn into almost, and this looks different if you, live in different states or things like that, or maybe aren't close enough to travel to their house. But if you are, it can look as something as simple as, hey, can I come over on Friday night and help you, clean out the fridge or whatever, just whatever it may be. I think that just offering that help and asking for it, definitely, like you said, is a good idea.
Well, and even using the gutters as an example, like for instance, let's say all three of you lived away, but you knew that Tim and I needed the gutters cleared out. Like researching a reputable gutter cleaning person, where we live, and just saying, hey, look, mom, I found three people that have really good ratings. Like, would you like me to call one of them for you and set it up? It's going to cost this much money, whatever that might be. There are ways you can help, from a distance too. So,
yeah.
Or like, for instance, if it's a medical issue, you're not here, you can't go to the appointments, but you can research things. You can look for, like I've had some friends that have dealt with some pretty terrible diagnoses, and sometimes it's looking into clinical trials, or it's looking into special funding for family members to stay with them at the Ronald McDonald House, or whatever that might look like. There's ways that you can help, even not being present, but just asking, how can I help, is very freeing, I think, for the parent, because it is hard to admit that there are things that not only you can't easily do anymore, sometimes you can't do them at all physically, but to come to the acknowledgement that you do actually need help. And usually this is older parents in their late 60s, 70s, 80s. That is just a hard realization as they start to lose their mobility and their independence. And so if you can start with little things when you are in your early 20s and your parents are a little younger, and kind of establish that we are a team, we're in this together, it's going to be easier to have those conversations. And the older parents are not going to feel like the child is trying to tell them, you don't know what you're doing, you're not capable of doing this anymore, let me step in, let me boss you around, let me tell you how to do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you alluded to. So, and I'm on to number 5, which I'm going to circle back to what Cayd led with his first one, which is, I love you. It's so important, I think, for not only parents to say that to kids, but for kids to say that to their parents. It can go both ways. It doesn't matter who says it first. It just needs to be said. And I know there are a lot of families that don't freely use those words. They're not affectionate. They don't, we go to leave an extended family gathering and it takes us 45 minutes to leave because everybody has to get a hug. Everybody has to get a kiss. I never forced my kids to do that, but they were all comfortable with it. And, we just went around and did that. And then you'd forget who you hugged or who you didn't hug. So you had to make a second round. And 45 minutes later, you're all piling in the car, right? That might have something to do with being from up north. That's just the way it works. And then you stand in the driveway for another half an hour talking before you actually pull out of the drive. So that's the way we did it. But I think those I love yous are so important, and extending on to that, but the hugs, the kiss, the holding a hand, any of those things. I think sometimes kids think they outgrow that stuff, and it's like, I don't care what someone thinks. If we're going down the street and all of a sudden you grab my hand, I don't give a crap what they think. They don't know who we are, they don't know our relationship, they don't. But like, if you are sensing my discomfort, or like, that's very soothing to have something like that happen. So I just think that being affectionate, that is, the not having that in the family is a generational curse that kids can break. It just might be that was never modeled to your parents in their family growing up, so they never replicated that. If they weren't the one to break the curse, you can be the one to do that. So I think it is so important, as ugly and hard and contentious as our world can be sometimes, that is the one thing we can hold on to, is that love. And between a parent and child, I think, in my head, in my heart, in our family, in our home, that is a sacred thing to me. So that is my number 5, circling back to Cayd's
for sure
number 1. Anything else about that one?
I love that. Just like I said, or like we kind of both said, it's just important to reiterate that whether it's actually saying I love you or a
Yeah.
hug or just something. It's easy, like I said, to assume that you love them. You know, they're your parent, they're your child. It's you think it might just be common knowledge, but sometimes hearing it just makes a big difference. And like I said earlier on in the episode, you never know, even though they are your parent or they
Mhm.
are your kid, you never know what they're going through. You know, maybe they have chose not to share something with you, and something as simple as that can really make
Mhm.
their day for sure.
Yeah. And, if you take the steps and take the effort, if your child is still living within the vicinity, or if a few days of longer have gone by without hearing from your kid than you're used to, or hearing from your parent than you're used to, and your radar goes off a little bit, that maybe something's a little bit askew, take the opportunity just to say, I love you. Hey, just checking
Hmm.
in, want you to know I love you. Like that might mean the difference between them having another couple of crappy days or them all of a sudden being able to kind of come out of their funk, and they might be like, I'm so glad you called me. This has really been a struggle week, whatever that might
Hmm.
look like. So I
Sure.
hope any of the young adults that are listening today feel inspired to kind of reach out to their parent around those 5 things that I've suggested. Feel free to use any of my thoughts or come up with one that's even more meaningful for you. Anything else you'd like to add about this, Cayd?
Just kind of to reiterate what I said earlier, I think that it's important to understand this doesn't just have to be for parents and kids. Everything we talked about can be related to just anyone in your life, whether it's friends, other family, anything like that. Again, just if you're thinking of someone, text them, call them, whatever that may be. That's really just kind of my last closing thoughts. What about you, Mom? Do you have anything more to
Yeah.
say on this topic?
Just that there is never too much love to go around. Like it is not something that can be overdone. So I would just continue to encourage you that every opportunity you have to do that for the people around you, and to take the time when you think of it to, piggyback on what Cayd said, when you think of it, do it now. Don't wait.
Mm,
None of us know how long we have. And so
for
you
sure.
want to make sure that if you're thinking it, you're saying it to your people. So, we really hope that you can step out of the everyday hustle that's going on and just take a minute to share those few important thoughts or feelings with your parent or young adult child after listening to this episode. Make it authentic, make it sincere, but I can guarantee you if you do it, it's going to be remembered. They're not going to forget. It is very, very important. So, too often we're just grinding the gears going through our days, right? We're on the struggle bus trying to survive, and it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be that way. You can have those glimmers, you can have those flashes of moments that really are what it is truly about. Those are the important moments. So with that, Cayd, you want to go ahead and close us out?
Yes, for sure. Like you said, just be intentional about it. There's never too much love in the world. And I personally think the more you give out, the more you get back in return. But with all that being said, that's a wrap on this episode of Raising Bigs. Thank you all for listening today. We hope you found some takeaways, a fresh perspective, an action step or two in this episode that you can apply to your life. Again, whether that is with your relationship with your child, your parent, anything like that. We are not experts by any means on this topic, but we can just share what we've learned in hopes of making the path a little bit more enjoyable for those who are listening to us. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Please subscribe and share with those in your circle who might benefit from hearing it, whether it's this episode or past episodes, or just the podcast in general. Tell them to listen to all available episodes. New episode comes out every single Monday. And yes, Mom, would you like to let them know where they can find you?
I sure can. You can visit my life coaching website at marcyhawkinson.com. That's Marcy with an I, Hawkinson, exactly how it sounds. Or email me at lifecoachmarcy@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Life Coach Marcy, or Instagram at life_coach_Marcy. Cayd, where can listeners find you?
My handle across all social medias is BK Berrigan, just B, first name, last name. That is Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all of that stuff. The best way to contact us, whether you want to give feedback on the show, ask us any questions, just let us know your thoughts and opinions, is to DM either one of us on social media or reach out on the contact me page on my mom's website. Again, that is marcyhawkinson.com. You can also email her at lifecoachmarcy@gmail.com. We appreciate any feedback, questions, or topic ideas that you guys may want to share. And with that being said, we will see you next time on Raising Bigs.
Thank you, Cayd.
Bye, Mom.